Welcome to Gatecrashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, and our code is this: to make all things more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe that you'll fall in love with. Today, I am joined once again by one of my favorite authors, the author of Lucky Day, Bury Your Gaze, Camp Damascus, not pounded by the physical manifestation of the gradual commodification of art and expression into the nebulous idea of content, or pounded by the physical manifestation of the shocking massive importance of pre-orders when supporting authors to enjoy in the traditional publishing industry. Also, pounded by the realization that Chuck Tingle's erotic works are a singular piece of art that skewers conservative fears of moral decay by repurposing them as the promise of a sex-positive utopia. But today, we are focusing on the newest book, Fabulous Bodies. Chuck, how are you?
Doing good, and I got to start by saying, truly impressed by the way you hit those tinglers. Um, as the writer of said work, you actually did better than I think I would do getting some of those out.
So I purposefully did not practice that. I was like,
Oh my gosh.
if I do not get this by just doing it naturally, I don't deserve it. So
You did great. You
thank
did
you.
great. I mean, the first one, especially, it's a lot. The mouth starts to get tired.
Commodification is a big word.
That's a lot. That's a lot. But after if we just did the first one, I'd say, gosh, were you trained as like an auctioneer? That was great.
I listened to when I was younger, I listened to a lot of Busta Rhymes, and I always found it so impressive how fast he and Weird Al could talk. But then I guess I at some point when I was a child was so interested in it, I wanted to understand how they did it. And it's just word choice, really. Like if you choose enough words, you can put them together and make them sound good. But
I'm just deeply impressed with this Busta Rhymes poll because, first of all, I agree. Like one of the best, and I feel like is not mentioned enough now. I mean, he certainly still is. Like people know who that is, but I legitimately think he's top 10 ever.
oh, he's so
You
good.
know, my personally, even outside of
Mhm.
when we look at art, there is, of course, like objective, we try to have an objective judgment, and there's who knows if that even exists, and then our own favorite. I was trying to make two lists in my head. There's
Mhm.
a list of like what's the best and what's my favorite. Those are two different lists. I think if you were trying to use objective measures, Busta Rhymes top 10. For me personally, like top three. I don't know. I mean, and he's not talked about nearly enough.
Yeah, there's such skill in the things that people do that if you take the time to break apart one piece of it, it's so impressive that that's only one piece.
Oh yeah.
I really like the way you think the my favorites versus the best, like because when I talk about someone like I don't know, like Spielberg, like I get that Jurassic Park and Jaws are the big ones, but like my favorite is Minority Report
Oh
The War of the
yes.
Worlds. Like those are two very sad, great films that I think are his best for me. So
Oh yes.
that is such an interesting
He's a hard one though, because I'm thinking like, how would you even? Some people, their best, I think, is easier to feign an objective
yeah.
list. Spielberg, I'm like, gosh, I don't even know how you would go about sorting through that because he's got about five, six, seven that I think you could make a good argument for being
Yeah.
the number one, right?
Yeah, and it's
Because I was just thinking it would obviously, off my head, I was like, well, obviously it would be Jaws, because maybe that's like, his first and kind of created the summer blockbuster. And then I thought, where does Jurassic Park go then? Where does E.T. go? Like, I don't, it's that he's
home.
an interesting case where it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know if you could even make that list.
That is, yeah. I and all of it's objective too. Like, how can a critic be truly? You read critics because you like what they have to say. You're not reading
Yeah.
critics because they are the objective, right or wrong. Now,
Yes.
I've I have ingested many interviews of yours over time, and you've always answered a couple questions along the lines of like, what is your horror origin? But I'm actually curious, this doesn't have to be your favorite, but what is a horror scene in a book, movie, whatever medium that has stuck with you the longest, that like in wrapped itself around your heart? Like, what is something that has captured your brain for this long?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot, and there's new ones, there's old ones. I do think, and I get people say this a lot about my writing. I'm described as cinematic a lot, and there's a lot of reasons for that in a technical sense. I think a lot of authors get called cinematic,
Mm,
but I think I get it more than most people, mostly because I do write. My plot beats are screenplay format beats. Everything is kind of written as if it's a 2 hour movie, but it's a novel. Novels and screenplays are different art forms, but I'm basically like taking screenplay format
mhm,
and placing it onto a novel. And along with that, a lot of my influences are film. So I tend to have, before I write, like little nuggets of imagery that I'm like, okay, I gotta hit that. Like these little pieces, these set pieces come before the novel, and then I kind of write to get to them. And it's because when I personally watch films, uh I remember these pieces, these flashes of
mm,
different things. I would say um probably I will go from like some of my oldest ones. I very strongly remember watching an episode of X-Files called Our Town, I think, and it's about cannibals in this small town that everyone works at a chicken factory. And there is a scene where someone is kind of losing their mind and they're working at this chicken factory, and there's the chickens on the posts going by, and in their delusion, slowly changes into like a severed head on a spike instead of the chicken.
mhm.
And they like freak out. And that is really ingrained in my mind for some reason. I think the entire conversation with Casey Becker, I hope I got the name right, from Scream, which is Drew
Mm.
Barrymore. The opening scene, everything about that, pretty seared into my brain. And I also think that that one in particular, when I think about dialogue and sort of like meta awareness and the horror and the comedy balance and all that stuff, I actually think that one is even more ingrained than I am aware of, because I can kind of see that scene in my own work a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's another one that I think is like deep in there.
Like the dialogue of it. What's something new that has like really stuck with you? I'm curious what you are ingesting horror wise these days.
Wow. Well, new is subjective because I see,
New to
I
you.
mean, I see a lot. I'm thinking of something
Mm.
new and I'm like, okay, but that movie's like 15 years old. But like I mean, the horror movie Martyrs, I don't know. I don't even want to, yeah, I shouldn't give away because there's a scene, like the very last scene of that always kind of sticks with me, and that's like a newer thing. Um Gosh, what did I see recently that I like really love the imagery of? You know what I really love the imagery of that was actually pretty recent was like Smile 2. I mean, that's like a year or two old, but you set that in the world of a pop star, you have dancers, you have these different things, and then that really gave the director a chance to like use pretty great imagery that is not common in horror, because that's not a common horror setting. In fact, the only people I think there's a lot of people who do it, but like that's a very much like a Tingleverse horror
Mhm.
setting. I guess it's kind of the type of place that I would like, the aesthetic that I would find. So
Yeah.
maybe that's why it resonates with me. But gosh, that one sticks with me. But I probably see in theaters uh 3 movies a month,
Wow.
probably. I
Nice.
see a lot of movies. And because I like horror, if a horror movie comes out, I'm gonna see it.
Good. That's I'm glad you're living that best life. Yeah,
Yes.
Smile too. Smile the dancer scene where all the dancers are in the house. I
It's
think
great.
that
It's beautiful,
one
right?
of the
Yeah.
most beautiful shot horror scenes in a very long time. And
Yes.
it didn't get the credit it deserved for just and the music rocked.
Music's great. It's
Naomi Scott is
really
so
wonderful.
good.
I really like the design of the demon because it is borderline silly. But
Yes.
that's kind of some of my favorite horror. I think, that's another thing that I kind of personally like always try to try to do is I do think that truly horrific stuff, the way that it would
Mm,
break through our normal, like our normal understanding of reality, to see something truly horrific in a supernatural way, not like
mm,
a, there's a
yeah.
more mundane horror that this doesn't apply to, but um I think the most real version of it, if you think about what it would look like, would probably be kind of silly. And there's something even more frightening about silliness.
Yeah.
I think there's a subconscious sort of like, if done right, it almost makes you think like this is so outside of human understanding that it doesn't care if it's silly.
Mm,
It's like
yeah.
it's not doing it for us. It just is, and what it is really strange.
That's why I think clowns have always had such a home in horror because like they're
Absolutely.
they're meant to be the absurdness of humanity. Like they're the painted mirror. So I'm gonna stop
Yes.
myself because I'll talk about clowns for hours. Now before we get into this book, I am curious because I've been trying to follow how you do your process because you write a Tingler in like 24-ish hours, I think you
24
said.
hours. I mean, honestly, it's quicker than that because it takes like 24 hours to publish. So if I get up one morning and I'm like, okay, it's going to be a Tingler day, which I've been pretty busy, so this is happening less and less, but it does
Mhm.
still happen. Um, if there's something on the news, something I think about, something happens, I'm like, I want to process this and understand it through writing. I'm gonna write a Tingler about it. That would be if it happens in the morning, let's say 8 a.m. I wake up and I see it. Actually, I wake up at like 5:30 every morning, but let's just say I see it
Wow.
at 8. And then I will probably take me about 12 hours. So I would probably write that, make the cover and everything. And I bet at 8 p.m. that night I would be hitting upload. But self-publishing platforms generally take like
Mhm.
a few longer. So there's the 12 hours on top of that, and then it would come out the next morning at about the time that I got the idea. So the process is about 24 hours because of the upload times, but I would say the writing is about 12 hours.
Now, if you're seeing things on TV and things like that, is there like, do you have a format for you physically, like for Tingler? Like, are you grabbing like a certain drink? Are you like, what is your ritual to do something that is it is a feat of 12 hours to write a a whole story is a lot. Like, what is your preparation for something like that?
Oh my gosh. Well, you know it's going to be a long day. I'll tell you that much.
Hmm.
So a lot of water. I mean, really,
Are you a desk writer?
it's more. Oh, what was that?
A desk
Desk?
writer? Yeah.
Um, no, I'm like a comfortable couch writer. Um, but literally, I think it's more of like a mental space. Is much more apparent because that's the way you write like
Hmm.
that, to be honest. Your biggest enemy with something like that is simply distraction, but it's also like getting up on that wave and riding it. Because once you lock in, it'll fly by fast. But actually, as I think most artists, most authors know, the locking in is the hardest part. The like climbing up on that surfboard and then you're cruising along, but getting there is tough. So I think making sure, okay, when I fall into this story, I'm not going to check my email. I'm not going to do these different things. That also, I'm on the autism spectrum. So sometimes that comes easier than others because, I have this hyper focus where I can just go. And once that takes hold, it literally is, it seems surreal to even say, or like a little more exaggerated or cinematic. But if I lock into that, it's kind of like you sit down in your chair and you start writing, and then you look up and you're like, gosh, I'm really thirsty, and the sun is somewhere else in the sky, and
Yeah.
I really have to go to the bathroom because I've been sitting in this chair for like 10 hours. Like, it really gets kind of wild like that if I can truly do it.
I love that. Now, we do have to get into Fabulous Bodies. I've gotten to read some of it so far and I'm loving everything. But how are you describing this book to people? Like what's your like off the cuff pitch for what this book is?
Well, that's an interesting question because the marketing department at Tor at Nightfire, my publisher, um, they have their own like, what is it? A lot of times you have comparing things. I will say the thing they came up with was not mine, but I love it because I'm like, oh, it actually is that. So I'll give you theirs and I'll give you
Mhm.
mine. They have said Drive meets Beetlejuice, because it is the story of an influencer who is also like a body snatcher or a grave robber at night, robs morgues of bodies and kind of deals them on the black market, who is tasked with picking up the body of her, basically her idol, her a queer icon named Eddie Michaels, who is a musician similar to like you'd say America's Elton John, and he wakes up during the delivery, and then everything else that happens kind of spirals off. So their description is good. I think I get it.
Mhm.
Uh, that is not at all what I was thinking when I wrote it, but that is what it is. So when I wrote it, actually, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Collateral, starring Jamie Foxx and Tom Cruise.
Oh yeah.
Really great movie. One of my favorites. Takes place over a single night in LA, where Jamie Foxx has to drive around a hitman, who is Tom Cruise, as he kind of goes about his business. And it's kind of like both simultaneously lush in showing LA and big and beautiful, but also very compressed of just these two folks talking in a car all night. And I love that movie. And so my initial idea was like, okay, what if I did Collateral with a monster instead of a hitman? That was kind of the idea. And that was the genesis of where it evolved. And obviously, that is true that of kind of where it goes. Obviously, Fabulous Bodies takes off in a very different direction. But the genesis was kind of there. So if I was going to pitch it to someone myself, while I do like my publisher's version of Drive Meets Beetlejuice, I would say Collateral with a monster in Palm Springs.
Yeah, that is such a good, like, I've just gotten to that meeting,
Oh
the
yes,
collateral
okay.
meeting. That is a really cool way. I'm so excited to get deeper into it because I love Collateral. Collateral's such a
It's amazing.
I only got to watch it last year. It was so
Oh,
good.
good. Oh my gosh, that's great. It's also such a gosh, on top of everything that we kind of mentioned this actually earlier, with Busta Rhymes, Collateral, I feel like people know it, but
Hmm.
gosh, it does feel underrated to me. I feel like it's a little bit overlooked. Um, I mean, maybe like it's not Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise's best performance is Magnolia, but Collateral is up there with one of his best performances. I mean, it's really good.
Yeah. Now you did mention that our main kind of protagonist, Poppy, is an influencer. I'm
Yes.
curious for you. Poppy, I mean, influencers kind of fill a space that has never existed before, but has always existed. There's always been people who are idolized and seen and heard more than others. For you, what does an influencer mean in today's world? Like what do you think their kind of role is?
Wow. I think it's the naturally distilled idea of fame that we have always had. I think that artists become famous, actors, musicians, a lot of people, and then there's other people who become famous for news items, maybe politicians or something. But artists generally become famous, and I think over time, the allure of fame has caused culture or people themselves to essentially try to like strip away the art from fame and
Hmm.
to very slowly just commodify like, hey, what if we could just have someone be famous without all that pesky art? And so I do think there's a bit of that where we have just because of social media been like, oh, you know what? We can actually now just monetize fame without anything to go with it. So that is fascinating to me. And I talk about, I don't want to sound like snarky or anything. I don't even necessarily know if like I have much of a issue with it. I think that there's an
Hmm.
interesting um connection there to some of the stuff that like Andy Warhol talked about in regards of
Yeah.
fame and like pop art and all that stuff. So I'm actually really not disparaging it so much as I'm just more like fascinated by it. I think it's really strange. And I guess if you were to ask me like, do you want that? I would say, no, I kind of like my fame with some
Yeah.
art attached. But I also can't like, I'm not here to like to talk down on it,
Yeah.
I guess.
I think it truly is. It is a role that came from nothing because it was created using technology and all that kind of stuff, and like it it rests its laurels on connection. Like everyone wants to feel seen and like they
Yes.
have something. So I think the parasocial aspect of it is so interesting to me. But I'm glad you bring up Warhol because I think there is an aspect of art in any form of selling yourself. Like
Oh, absolutely. And
you,
that's even after I said that, if we were going to get really into it,
yeah,
I would say I'm being a bit flippant because there is art in being an
hmm
influencer. Like, there I'm talking in pretty broad
yeah,
generalizations here to like kind of make it
yeah,
palatable. But if we were to really get into it, being a influencer without art, like I was saying, doesn't actually exist.
yeah,
There's art in literally everything, and even curating posts, despite what some folks would probably be upset about that or something to hear that. But it is true. Like art is everywhere, including things that most would dismiss as like branding or
yes,
brands. Even the most vapid seeming thing, I think, connects to what you're
yeah.
saying is that, Warhol understood that art is everywhere, including like, a Campbell's soup can.
Yeah, I think for me the reason it's so interesting to me is because I think I've been rethinking what art means to me, like in a very nice way that it's like everything, sex, wrestling, comics, books, everything is art. Like everything
Absolutely.
is
I agree.
creating something else, and I think it's so interesting, especially with a character like this. And I did write a quote down that I'm fascinated with the characters that you have been putting in books. Um, the outside the Tinglers. I mean, I love the Tinglers, but like outside, you're doing very interesting character work. And the quote that I have is, "People have no fucking idea what they actually need." And Poppy says it when she's talking about what her daughter may or may not need financially, monetarily, things like that. I'm curious for you, how do you go about creating a character's needs? Like how much is that motivated by the story itself or versus like what situations you're putting them into? I'm just curious what your approach to building a character and fleshing them out is like.
Yes. Well, my hierarchy goes, I've talked about this a bit. A lot of folks in writing and art, they talk about either character or plot, right? And are you a character first author? Are you a plot first author? Generally, these days, plot first is looked down upon. It's seen as kind of like lower class or whatever.
Hmm.
The literary idea is that your characters should drive the story, and that is fine. I happen to disagree. I think that you can do whatever the heck you want, but I think maybe generally it's decent advice for someone who's never written before to
Mm,
tell them let your character lead. That being said, I do neither. Actually, I always say that I write message first. So the North Star of all of my writing is me sitting back and thinking, what is the gift of this story? What am I giving the audience? Why am I even doing this? What is the point? I think that, I am interested in um, I'm interested in the purpose in a very fundamental and elemental sense. Sometimes that can be political. Sometimes that can just be entertainment. You can say these are the purpose of this is entertain you for 2 hours while giant robots beat each other up.
mm,
That's perfectly valid too. But I would say that is message first. Right under that is characters, and then under that is plot. That is kind of like if each one is driving it, that's the way I work. So really, if I start with the purpose, a lot of the forming of the character is what which character is going to help me accomplish my goal the
mm.
most, which generally comes through a change in the character. I think because of that, I generally in general, kind of write unlikable characters at the beginning of my books because I am looking for change. And they're all unlikable in different ways. Probably the most likable is like Rose from Camp Damascus, because the things that make her frustrating for a reader are not really her fault. It's like the way
Mhm.
she's raised and all this stuff. Or maybe, Mishan Barrier Gaze is very much like me, but he's like a bit of a blowhard, pretty full of himself in his writing, and there's all this stuff. I would say that uh uh in Fabulous Bodies, Poppy is definitely the least likable so far because she has a pretty abhorrent job, and is an incredible narcissist, just incredibly, incredibly vain. But she also has some good qualities. I find, with a character that is unlikable, the best thing that you can do to have the audience move along with you is to make them really, really good at what they do. So while she is kind of unlikable for some reasons, she's also incredibly good at what she does. And I think if you have that, it's easier to latch onto and carry through. But the whole point of it is that uh, these characters, if you start them in kind of an unlikable place, you have a lot of room to like through the story, let them evolve and grow and change. And that's just a good place to start them.
Huh. I was so excited when this book was announced that it was a body. She's a body snatcher. She's a grave
Yes.
robber. I've been following. I'll tell you more about this offline, but I've been following a story from Pennsylvania near me where someone was actually grave robbing. Like he was going into catacombs, taking pieces and selling them. So
Wow.
like think like reading this and I'm like, sometimes you're like, grave robbing's not a thing people do anymore. No, it's still a business. I'm
Yeah. I
curious for
think
you,
I
like what how did you research that? Like what is
so I have a very close family friend, let's say, someone who I know very well, who is a mortician. And so a lot of it, I talked to them. And initially, when I had this idea, I had the same reaction you did, which was like, I was like, okay, this will be fun to write, but is that even possible? Like, what would you actually have to do in 2026 to actually steal a body? And so I called uh, with some trepidation because I was like, they're just going to tell me that this isn't possible. And then I'm going to have to kind of adjust my idea. And the first thing they said, I was like, would this idea be possible? And like, it is scary how possible it is. And I'm basically, they were like, I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often because, well, for one main reason, and I actually talk about this in the book, like everything that Poppy says in the book is actually true about the way the system works, which is that there is no federal standardized system of requirements and or system of like tracking bodies. And so because of that, people don't realize this, but because there's not like some let's say I'm in California, but like California statewide body database or any sort of thing like that, if a body shows up somewhere, it's all like all these places they haven't been updated for years. It's like and some of them have. That's the thing. Some of them have, but if you just go out to some town in the middle of the desert or something, they're maybe they're still writing things down on like in filing cards, So
yeah.
it's actually kind of shocking how realistic and easy the stuff I talk about in the book would be.
It is it when I had followed this story deeply because it's just so fascinating. He was leaving monster energies in the catacombs he would rappel down into. So it's like
Wow.
it's still very I don't think there's a
Was that
more
intentional or was that
I
like
think
kind
I
of
think he just left it.
a
Uh
brony thing? I
maybe
I kind of like it. I kind of love that as like um
trademark.
well, I'm thinking of like the Wet Bandits in Home
Yeah.
Alone.
Yeah.
It's like now I leave every crime scene I leave behind a
Yeah.
monster
Like the
energy.
Riddler. He's instead of
Yes,
a
yeah.
he's like
Bright green pans.
now it's about the clues. Got to get the
Yes.
clues in there. But yeah, he was like on Instagram just selling. It's
Wow.
Pennsylvania is a fascinating place.
Yes, yes.
Now we I think this is a kind of a first is we're having a mother-daughter relationship as one of the main kind of pillars of this book, with your guiding light kind of being your what and your why for a story. How do you create a relationship between a mother and daughter to kind of go to your North Star?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it is true that I haven't had like parental relationships have not really been a part of the horror Tingleverse that much. There isn't certainly, and it's funny I say that because like Lucky Day, my previous book, had the parental relationship was a huge part of that
Mhm.
book, but no spoilers, the parent isn't really around for the book, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
They actually all do. Now I'm thinking about I phrased that wrong because in Camp Damascus
Yeah,
there's a
it's
parental
Damascus is pretty
relationship
big.
too. But I guess what I'm mostly saying is that I feel like the crux of the book is
Mhm.
not necessarily like the parent and the child are not they're not the focus of the story. And I think this one is much more like on the page that is an interaction that is happening for like a large chunk of it. So it was interesting. I think the hardest part is writing kids, to be honest, because so much happens with children in such a little time. The difference between like a 4-year old and a 5-year old is light years. And so that was the hardest thing. And so I definitely made sure Marlowe, I talked to some parents and stuff. I was like, is this appropriate? Is this what? And they're like, yes. And it's very hard to thread that needle because it changes if they're a year younger or a year older.
There is I want to commend you because you said it's hard to write children, but there is a line that I've already highlighted where Marlowe is talking about fish and that they smell through water, and she says it's pheromones instead of pheromones. I was like, that's incredible. I highlighted
Yes,
it just because it made me smile so much. It's like, oh, that's so cute, but like very funny. Like
yes.
having no idea what you're actually saying. So it is
Big
interesting.
facts, but slightly off.
Yes, it's awesome. Now, I am interested in this parental relationship because everyone knows parents can give you plenty of trauma. But when you're dealing with a story like this where mom is in danger, do you think like the trauma is that she's afraid of like what might happen to her daughter because of her? Like what kind of fear does that elicit to tell a story?
I mean, so what's interesting, I think a lot of folks are saying this is, since it has kind of come in and the world is reacting to it now.
Mhm.
There's a bunch of reviews, all this stuff, and you never know what's going to happen. But I think a lot of folks think that this is my scariest book. And I do think a lot of that is because um, the well, first of all, children in danger is immediately frightening, to be honest. But also like that parental bond, I think if you can tap into that and you're going to empathize with it, if someone reads it and they can see their child on the page,
Mhm.
in a primal sense, I don't necessarily know if there's anything more powerful than that. Just in the way that human beings are built, I think that that might be the most frightening loss that you could have, even more than your own death, to be honest. So I mean, I just think that that's like it's like a powder keg of fear when you're talking about horror, basically.
Yeah, and you've brought up death, and I'm curious for you, being that this book is dealing with the intersection of life and death. When you're talking about death, are you a celebrator or are you a mourner? Like, how do you handle something like that?
I mean, it's probably like because I'm such an existential buckaroo, I think that um it is the most frightening thing that there is to me, which seems obvious, but it's just the way I
Mhm.
interact with it is such a I am agnostic. So without having any sort of like afterlife to really rely on, there is a finite thing to it that is so hard for me to wrap my head around that it is frightening. But because of that, I think I have developed kind of a healthy uh it works both ways, basically. It's like if you really appreciate how frightening and final death is, I think it's really easy to have gratitude for your life and to kind of live every day to the fullest, to never let up on the gas pedal as far as saying yes to life and to existence and that type of thing. So I think that at the very least, I can use it as fuel, and that's kind of the most important thing.
That is so interesting because the last time you and I spoke, you said something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing you here, but it is so incredible that you and I both exist at this exact time where we can have this exact conversation. And that kind of like rewired how I think about life and death. Just like, I'm just so excited to be here. And like
It's
every,
pretty astonishing when you
yeah,
it's a little too much, actually. It's like, speaking of horror, we think about Lovecraft. He always talks about like these unknowable horrors of the universe. And what's funny is that as much as the existential nothing is terrifying, little we don't talk enough about how, like, if you really existentially understood life, you would just be in a constant state of awe and
yeah,
joy and love. It is the fact that we are here at the very beginning, or just to begin with, is kind of enough, and everything else is like a bonus round. Like, we're racking up extra credit every day just by being here.
yeah.
We already won the race.
Yeah, it's just so and like the effect that you can have in life, and I think you and I have spoken with this between like I've since our last conversation, I something happened with our timing and we both showed up and nothing was prepared. Since that interview, I no longer fully write out questions because I did it all from the heart. And you're like, you said to me, you said you should do from the heart more, and I've never turned back. And I've been a
Huh.
better,
Well,
a
it feels good right now. I mean, this is great. Well, what that does, I mean, in a technical sense too, as an interviewer or interviewee, um, we are obviously always try to listen to each other, right?
mhm.
But I do think that is tempting, and maybe uh interviewers who have not been doing it for a while, who have like a big list of questions, unfortunately, subconsciously, what that makes people do is they don't listen as well,
Yeah.
because you're kind of like waiting for the next one to go. But if you don't have another question, you're in it. You're like
Yeah.
fully there. So you kind of want to make a balance, I think.
Yeah. I just keep notes, just like basic notes of like one word things that I really want to touch on. Like
There you go. Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect.
you you got to create a rock star with Eddie Michaels. What was
Yeah.
that? Like I know you're very into pop culture and stuff like that. Like what were the pieces that went into Eddie Michael?
So that's actually kind of interesting, because another thing with like the early version of
Mm,
this book, um, I almost didn't write it because I couldn't get his character right. Because initially I was like, okay, who's this going to be? There was sort of like a Laurel Canyon 70s rock kind of vibe. And so initially it was supposed to be like a sort of groovy, like witchy Stevie Nicks kind of thing. And that was like originally the dichotomy. Um, and it just like didn't work. I was planning it out and stuff, and it was fine, but it wasn't like the rocket fuel that I wanted it to be. When I
yeah.
when I set these two characters in my head into the cab, there was something a little too chill about the groovy, like the witchy Laurel
Mm,
King Stevie Nicks thing. And then the second that I switched it to Eddie, it all made sense. And to craft him, I essentially went like to another side of that scene, which was, like the Elton John, the sort of flamboyant thing, but also, I mean, there's so many people, from like Randy Newman or even Billy Joel, if you're talking about like piano buckaroos. But really, if we're talking about like the queer lineage of
mm.
that kind of like queer rock, obviously Freddie Mercury would be another big one. And then like George Michael, So there's like this whole there's an interesting thing with queerness and rock music, where I don't know how, but it just like it doesn't get noticed or acknowledged. Like, it is so bizarre. Like, think of how big the band Queen is. Think about what their name is,
Yeah.
and that's one of the biggest like heavy rock bands of all time. And Freddie Mercury is so flamboyant and stuff. And I feel like now we understand. We
Yeah.
understand how queer that is. But at the time, it's just like it's weird. Like people just did not care or notice at a time when they cared
A lot
outside of
more.
the stadium,
Yeah.
right?
And it's interesting because like Judas Priest as well, but I mean, they're
Perfect example. Oh my
he's not as
goodness.
like, but like the leather and the chains and like you and I know, like that
Yes.
comes. There's queerness
Well,
that
it's
comes with
funny.
that.
You were gonna say he's not as flamboyant in some ways, but I'm gonna let
Yes.
you know in certain queer scenes, he is he's right down the middle
Yeah.
in a different kind of scene. So yeah, I mean you're absolutely right.
Now that does bring me to something else I really wanted to talk about with Poppy. Her job, she's a queer person, and the job is not nice. It's not a good
No.
wholesome thing. Do you think as we continue to get more queer horror and queer content just across the board, we are having more space for messy or problematic queer characters more than just like having to show them be good because people don't think they're good?
Yeah, I mean I would hope so. I think we are always kind of evolving and learning more about like the boundaries of art and things like that. And I think that that is like a hurdle that we have kind of been pushing past. I mean that essentially is like the entire idea of my book Bury Your Gaze is
Mhm.
there's sort of like a I mean, not to give, how can I phrase this to not give too much away? I would say that when you're reading Bury Your Gaze, it seems like the point is to let queer characters be heroes. And I think there's sort of like a fake out where you think, oh, we've won because now queer characters can be heroes. And then you realize, oh, that is just as bad, if not
Yeah.
worse. And that really what you need is for queer characters to be able to
Exist.
exist, to just to be whatever they want, to be villains, to be heroes, to be messy, to be bad and disturbing or uplifting and
Hmm.
heroic. I mean, it's all it is it should not be a monolith, I guess. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of the point of that one.
I, I I really like that. Now, when you're right, as you progressed into the horror world, you've done quite a lot now. How do you how do you work to improve how you are making something visceral or disgusting or like horrific? Is there like any techniques you use? Like, are you doing more research? Like, how do you get to the point where you feel more confident in what you're doing?
Interesting. Yeah, I have always it's a good book to ask it with because this is definitely of my horror novels. It is probably the most violent, it's the most gory. But that's not necessarily like me saying, oh, I'm intentionally
Yeah.
cranking up the dial. It's just that like each story is as horrific or violent or whatever as the story calls for.
Hmm.
It's not planned in any way. I would say in some ways you could say like maybe Camp Damascus would be the most tame. Well, at the same time, it's so interesting because people are skinned alive in Camp Damascus, and that's the most tame. So I guess if you haven't read me, take that however you'd like. But I really think that like it really is just like what does the
Mm.
story call for? As far as a practical technique, really, if you're writing something that is violent and shocking and those different things, I think the two things that I like to do are one, I think unfortunately a lot of folks have been taught show don't tell and think that that rule applies to everything all the time. I completely disagree with that. These are tools. It's like saying when you build a house, screwdrivers, not hammers. These are just like different things. There are character voices that are more telly there or versus showy. Like this is just a piece of a puzzle. And so I've always had a problem with that being a thing of like you should never tell.
Hmm.
Perfect example, I think, of that is with violence in a horror novel. a technique that I like to use is, you're writing your normal levels of like description, your normal balance of show versus tell for that particular character. And then when something really shocking happens, just tell it. Start by telling it. The very beginning of that paragraph is just, and then this happened. And it's in the plainest language you can, a short sentence. I love that because it just makes it so sharp and shocking. There's no build up, there's no like roll into it. You just say like this person's head was severed from its body. Like that is shocking. And then afterwards you describe it. But to start with a tell and then describe, I think works really well. And then the next thing is once you get to that description part of it, just remember your senses, to be honest. Like I think we are predisposed to think of everything in visual. So like this is what it looked like and blah blah, blah. But scent, taste, touch, like there's so much more that I think is easy to forget about. And if you want to be visceral, I think it's always to remember the other senses. I think that's something that buckaroos overlook a lot.
It's so interesting to get to talk to someone who's creating the stuff that I'm enjoying, because the way you've described how you're building a scene like this, the Eddie Michaels scene where he passes is you can see it there. You can see the tell, you can see the show, you can see all of it. It's all on display. So you listen to this, then you read it. Just keep that in mind when you go into that scene. Now, we're doing something new this time. We've talked about this a little bit. Our last prose interview has sent a question for you. The last prose interview was with Kyle Corey, the author of The Problem Drinker, a friend of yours.
Yes, he's a bud of mine.
He asked if the tarot cards were real or a coincidence.
Wow, I love that. This is wonderful. This is wonderful. Kyle's a bud of mine. There's a very interesting story about this because this is basically, referencing. There's a personal anecdote here. That's very, very funny and interesting. I don't know how much he talked about it, but it is in his book. So the thing that's neat about The Problem Drinker is that I read a really early version, but I'm in it. It's a nonfiction book, and I pop in a few times as a dang cameo. I guess this is not a spoiler for the book because it's very vignette, but Kyle and CJ Lead is one of my very best buds in the dang world. And so they are together and they had moved into a new house and invited me and Sweet Barbara, my partner, to just hang out. And we did tarot cards. And the tarot reading that I gave, and this is in the book, so if you find this interesting, check out the book. Tarot reading that I gave is one of the worst tarot readings. Like it is astonishingly bad. I find that if you're doing that with friends and you're hanging out, there's always a way to interpret it that like no one gets like bummed really. Like you're like, oh, that seemed bad, but that's this card, and like, and then look at what's next in the future. Like there's always a way to kind of like swing it. Not this one. This was astronomically bad. Talked about destruction, talked about like it was death and like the end of something important. And right after we did that, we were like, okay, well, maybe we don't believe in tarot cards. Maybe let's just ignore that and have a good night. And I will jump ahead to say that their house that they just moved into, that we spent that first evening hanging out in, was in the Palisades. And we all know what happened with the fire. The fire happened just like a week or two after that day. So we go to this house, I spend one night in there giving the worst tarot reading of all time, of just utter destruction. And then the Palisades burned down. So I'm like, gosh, I really hope psychically, don't blame me. It's not my reading. Fate comes before the reading. The reading does not control fate. But it was like, gosh, that was one of the most, as far as my relationship to tarot cards, that is in my life one of the most shocking. Like it sounds like for the sake of the story, I'm exaggerating it, and it's like, no, that really happened, and it was kind of shocking. I am an agnostic as far as like religion goes and spirituality and all those things. And I'm like right in the middle and stuff, but honestly, something like that really kind of freaks me out. It was pretty wild, to
Yeah.
be honest.
It's the book is so interesting. I met Kyle through CJ because I've interviewed many times.
Oh, of course, yes.
So I that's how I got to Kyle, and like reading the book where like all of these people who I know because I interview them. It's like, oh my God, there's Chuck, there's Stephen Graham Jones. Like it's fascinating to see these people who I know as human beings as characters in a book.
Yes.
And I did ask Kyle in our interview about you. If you are always Chuck Tingle and you were always Chuck Tingle, which is that's who you are.
Here I am.
I love it.
Yes.
There
Yes.
the ulti the
He know, yes, we do hang out in the off time, and nope, it's true. It's so funny too. I always that's with some buds of mine, like I think people
Mhm.
think that, but my favorite thing is like people assume like, oh, Chuck must like there must be something at like Macmillan when I have my meetings where like everyone's like, oh, they don't know that Chuck. But I go to my meetings in a mask. I wear this mask when I meet with my lawyer. My lawyer doesn't even know my legal name. So it's
That's incredible.
yeah, oh no. When I am in New York, I visit like the Macmillan offices a lot. And yeah, I stroll in there with my mask and have all my meetings and all that. Yeah.
You I you are authentically yourself, and I admire it. I love it, and it's why these books are so good. Now,
Thanks.
where can people find all of your where all of your stories, all of the Tinglers, all of the not content, the art that you have created?
Oh, it's a little bit. Let's honor Warhol and say that it can
Yeah.
be a little of both. I mean, chucktingle.com. And I think, honestly, the one thing I would say to anyone listening to this is if you want to dive in specifically to the Tingleverse horror, Fabulous Body is great place to start. And pre-orders, so much more important than folks realize. Like, I think pre-orders in things like video games or different things have kind of given pre-orders like a bit of a bad name. In books, they are so important. It like literally determines like the shelf space that publishers give books and stuff. So while it can be tempting to think, oh, that's interesting, I'm going to make sure to get that the day it comes out. This is just me saying, if you're listening to this and you wanna support the book, you're interested, pre-order Fabulous Bodies, because it helps so much more to get a pre-order than you would ever believe. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, pre-orders coming from the comic space are beyond important for
Oh, I
books.
forgot. Yeah,
Yeah,
comics is probably is the same for sure.
because you won't even get into the shop if people aren't pre-ordering.
No, yeah,
So with pros and comics, make sure you're pre-ordering the stuff you like are excited about because then it'll be in the places you want it. And then
yes,
other
yes.
people can get it too because it'll show that people are excited about this stuff.
Oh yeah.
So thank you again for being here. You can find us at gatecrashers.fan where we do all of our reviews, interviews, analysis, and everything in between. Thank you.
Thank you.